Welcome to Breakthrough the Ordinary podcast. Are you ready to commit to your future self? If you are, sibling duo Mark and Claudine Schermante will take you on a journey of self-discovery to unlock your highest potential. Through impactful conversations with thought leaders, healers, coaches, and entrepreneurs, we will share practical tools and strategies to generate the life you envision. New episodes drop every Monday.
Hi, and we welcome Amanda Hallam, is a holistic health and lifestyle coach who helps women make peace with food and their body. She believes that all aspects of our lives are intertwined and helps her clients find ways to balance them for maximum joy. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
That was nice and precise.
Yes, and I've been looking forward to this conversation because it's a topic that's near and dear to me. I look forward to what we create today. And being that theme of our podcast is breakthrough, right? The personal breakthrough. We always start with that question for all of our guests. What do you believe is the breakthrough that individuals get to have in their life so they can have the life they say they want?
The breakthrough that we all get to have is realizing that we are the creator of our own life. Once you realize that and you begin to take responsibility for your actions, it changes the way that you see yourself. And you realize that if I did this to myself, if I put myself in this situation, then I can undo this for myself and I can get myself out of this situation. And it gives you so much more power and so much more, responsibility, but in the best way, because you know that you're the one in control and that no one is coming to save you. It's not anyone else's fault that you're here. It's not necessarily your fault. Sometimes it's just circumstances, but you are the one who's going to come save you. You don't need a prince on a white horse to come in and swoop you off your feet. You can do that for yourself.
I appreciate that, the idea that we're the author, right? We're accountable for the life that we generate. And what would be, when I can realize that I authored it, I can make different choices. How do you think that can help people break through in a day-to-day way or in a life way, if we could take it in that place?
So just thinking about what you want your story to be. Even as you're living each moment, making each decision, every decision that you make leads to another one and so on. And every time you make a decision, you get to ask yourself, is this what I want my story to look like? Is this really how I want to look back on my life and have this be my reality? And if the answer is no, then what can you do in this moment to change your reality? It's not about changing 5 years from now. It's not about changing the world. It's just about changing this very moment. And it could be something as simple as doing the opposite action of what you want to do. If you want to beat yourself up over dropping a glass of water and being like, oh, I'm the worst. It could just be like, well, gravity stinks sometimes. I almost said something else. I don't know if I can swear here, so I won't. But, it's just changing your perspective and asking yourself if this is really how you want your life to play out.
So we acquire these stories. I mean, we want to write a new story, but we have these stories going. So where do you believe they come from? And how do you start to even shift the story?
So a lot of our stories come from what's ingrained in us in childhood. I mean, for instance, the work that I do is helping women heal their relationships with food and body image. And a lot of that stems from our parents. Before we even realize it, we're surrounded by diet culture. We're surrounded by the media and the effects that that's had on our parents. It's not even the effect that it has on us directly. It's just the effect that it's had on them and how that affects the way they raise us. So there's a quote. I'm just going to read it because I don't want to mess it up. But it is a quote by David Foster Wallace. He said in a commencement speech, and I don't remember the university. I apologize, but there are two young fish swimming along who happen to meet an older fish. The older fish nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and asks, "What the hell is water?" And that is so powerful to me for a lot of different situations. I mean, diet culture being one of them, but certainly not the only one. But it's essentially the water that we're swimming in. We don't realize that whatever the environment we're grown up in, that we've been brought up in, is just our environment. It's not everyone's environment. Everyone grows up in a different reality. And so when we start to get a little older and we interact with people who have these different realities, we realize like, I was in different water than they were. So like if your parents are super concerned with their appearance or like healthy eating, clean eating, which is a really popular thing right now, then that might be something you're super concerned with. If your friend has grown up and that's not even on their radar, maybe they've already broken the generational narrative, they've broken the cycle, or maybe they just are genuinely, it's not part of their life. They might have a very different reality. And maybe they're like, yeah, of course I ate a Twinkie for lunch today. Who cares? And you'd be like, oh my God, I'd have to go 3 hours on the treadmill to eat a Twinkie. I can't do that. It's two very different realities. But to you, your reality is, it's the only one for a very long time. So it's just what's ingrained in us from growing up.
Well, I can relate to that.
And that soup is everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. It might be different, but it's everywhere in some form or another.
And I appreciate that. We grew up, I'll just say for me, my interpretation of our family is we're very concerned with our image. We have a very big looking good story. That's generational. That's not just my mother who comes from the cosmetology field. But on top of that is a generational, her mother, and I'm sure before her. How does this, super narrative start to manifest in our body? Right? Because I want to, bring us, so you have the story, you have your context, and then it's how does it show up in form?
Right. So back to the example that I was using about just obsession with dieting and thinness and appearance and that sort of thing, because that's kind of not what I was brought up in. I mean, my mother certainly was always trying different diets and she was worried about her body size and that sort of thing, but it wasn't obsessive. It was still deeply ingrained in me because as children, we pick up, I think, it's magnified 10 times onto the children. So for me, it was like a subconscious desire to be thin, to want to feel like I looked good, to feel like I was pretty. A lot of people will get into playing dress up or putting a lot of makeup on or something like that at a young age. I did a little bit when I was younger, and then I kind of snapped out of it. And now I don't wear any makeup at all, and I dress very comfortably because that's how I genuinely feel my best. But a lot of people will strive for a body that's not realistic for them. They will try to go on all these fad diets. They'll try to restrict food. They try to over-exercise to get a particular body that maybe isn't in the design for them. They will try to alter, I guess, their hair, their appearance, their makeup, that sort of thing to try to be pretty. And it all comes down to feeling valuable and worthy and desirable. So if you're taught that thin is successful and thin is worthy and thin is valuable, and that's what you're going to chase. And you think that you're chasing thinness, but you're chasing value. You want to be wanted. You want to be loved and you want to feel worthy of that. So you're chasing this superficial thing, but the true meaning of what you're chasing is so much deeper than that. And we don't realize that until, for me anyway, years later.
Yeah.
So true. I remember dating somebody like 30 years ago, and she ended up in a hospital because she had that whole idea how to eat a certain way, and it ruined her. And I remember her saying that everybody has their own weight, their own way of looking, being. Like there is no status quo. There is no, and we don't allow that whatever weight you're at, whatever look, it's fine. There is nothing to gauge it against. And I remember, and it took a lot of healing for her at that time to finally, heal that. But I thought, wow, that makes sense. Because I even know in myself, I've tried, there's a certain parameters. I'm in a parameter. That's my body. It's not going to get smaller. It's not going to, this is my parameter. And everybody has one.
I bet that it feels pretty effortless for you. And that's something that I call like a happy weight. And so my happy weight right now is very different than what my happy weight was when I was, say, 14. But how many people are chasing that high school weight? They're chasing that high school physique. Like, you were a teenager. Are you kidding me? You're not meant to be that size, that shape. You're not meant to be that body anymore. You've grown and evolved out of it. And your happy weight, for me, is what feels just about effortless for you to maintain. When you're eating what feels good to you, what makes your body feel its best, when you're moving your body in a way that brings you joy, and you're not trying to move in a way to earn calories, you're not moving as punishment, and you're just kind of floating along and making peace with your body. And so that's ultimately what I help my clients do, is find their happy weight and make peace with that. And some people, I've had clients come to me and they say, I want to lose X number of pounds. I'm like, okay, well, are you like married to that number because it might not happen. But what I can help you do is create the habits that that person would have. And once you create those habits, let's see where your body ends up. And a lot of times, because it's such a mental block and it's not actually about that physical number, it's about what that physical number means to them emotionally, then we can get past the number on the scale and we can just feel better.
Yeah. But how do you unravel that? Because if you're ingrained in a story and you're ingrained in image, whatever it is you're carrying or looking for, because you're looking for love, really, acceptance and all that. How do you start unraveling that to even get to habits or the stuff that's behind it?
So ultimately, the first thing that I do is I assess my client's life where they are right now. What do their habits look like as far as eating habits, exercise habits, just general day-to-day? What does a day in their life look like? What's working for them and what's not working for them? And what are the things that they would like to change? Because a lot of the time, there's habits that they have that they don't like. They keep coming back to the number. They keep coming back to the weight and the food. It's not really about the food. The food is a symptom. And ultimately, they're looking to get support in changing habits in their day-to-day life. So we kind of start with a baseline of like, how are you doing right now before we even get started on changing anything? And I'll have them start with a food journal, but not your typical, like, I had 1 cup of cereal at 8 o'clock in the morning and it was this many calories, like not that kind of food journal. I have them write down like whether or not they were hungry, if they felt presence or lack of hunger, how they felt emotionally before and after the meal. So let's say they went into the meal and they were hungry and then after the meal they were satisfied. Whereas emotional eating could look like going into the meal feeling stressed and then coming out of the meal feeling too full and still stressed. So it's really just kind of a band-aid for the problem. And they start to see that because once you start tracking these things, they start to see patterns and they realize that it's not really about the food. It's about how they're turning to food in times of stress in their life and how they're beating their bodies up when they should be celebrating them. We only get one body. So ultimately, one of the things that we do a few weeks down the line, I typically work with people for a minimum of 12 weeks. And a few weeks down the line, I start to introduce joyful movement. And so what that looks like is whatever style of moving your body feels best for you. And for some people, it's going for a walk with their kids and their dog. For some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's strength training. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody, and it doesn't even have to be the same every day for you. It could be different every day. And I always joke that me personally, I'm very like squirrely with my workouts. Like, ooh, squirrel. Because it's whatever feels good that day. I don't hold myself to a rigid, like structured plan for working out. I used to, but I don't have a particular goal in mind right now. There's not a marathon I'm training to run. There's not a weightlifting competition I'm training to enter. So without that kind of a hard goal on the horizon, I get the ability to just be flexible and say, today I'm going to do yoga. Tomorrow I'm going to go for a run. The day after that, I'm going to lift some weights. And I kind of pass that on to my clients because as long as they're not training for something specific, there's no need to be regimented and so strict with your exercise where it feels like it's work. It should feel like a joyful part of your day. Like you get that time just to yourself where nobody else can take that away from you, even if it's 5 minutes. And sometimes that's all it gets to be. 5 minutes is better than 0. So
You've touched on several topics that I'm kind of, I love the, and I've done the food journal. And this past year, 2021, I actually had a food journal for many months. But, there's 2 points that I've never entered. It was so food oriented. And that was great educating for me, like to see really what I was putting in my body and my choices. But I love the idea of the full, not full, or satisfied, I should say, not right. And where am I emotionally? Because that's really what I've seen about myself, but it wasn't being recorded. And I love that you're adding that a little piece, right? I'm really aware that I'm an anxious eater, right? Like I'm feeling something, I'm having a sensation in my body, and I'm actually just labeling it right now as anxious. I can't tell you, sometimes I don't. I just know the tightness in the chest or something, and I'll go right for something particularly crunchy. There's something orally for me to have the crunch. And it doesn't really change the experience. It numbs it for a short amount of time. It's like a drug that's like, oh, And you're right, it's not about the food, but the food is the drug, so to say, or the Band-Aid, I think you said.
Let me tell you, not to interrupt you, but if you go for crunchy food, do you like apples?
I do like apples.
If you have never eaten an apple aggressively, you're not living.
What's an aggressive apple
is,
eating? Let's just get clear.
Oh my God. You could just, you bite into the apple like you're biting someone's face off. And it's so cathartic. I did
eat the hell out of that apple.
I did it not on purpose one day. I was really stressed out leaving work, and I had brought an apple with me for after work because I had errands to run or something. And I bit into that apple. I just was furious. And then I was like, ooh, oh, that kind of felt good. Let me try that again. I ate that whole apple like I was mad at it. And then I felt really good afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, on some level, it's also you're having an experience, like an embodied experience, the way you're speaking into it. And I would agree that there's a mindlessness when I use food as a drug. And it was really through coaching that I was like, oh, when I'm using food as a drug, I act like the victim versus being the author of my life and saying, like, there's choice and agency here.
Yep. You almost feel like you're giving food the power.
Exactly.
You're letting food console you rather than letting yourself console. It's a totally different dynamic between you and food when you're letting it have the power over your life. And one thing that I did want to mention that I didn't say, but when I work with my clients, we don't do weigh-ins and we don't do measurements. And so that's another thing that kind of blows people's minds when they start working with me, because they're like, well, when do I weigh in? When do we do measurements? Like, how do we track success? And success is so individualized that I think the numbers are such a small part of it. I mean, if you're going to your doctor and you're getting lab tests and those are coming back improved, I mean, that's great. Those are wonderful indicators of health, so much more than just a number on a scale would be. And one of my clients actually, well, I do this with all of my clients, but one of them had kind of laughed at me in the beginning. I actually have them take a happiness quiz at the beginning and at the end of coaching. And it's through the University of Pennsylvania. I found it online. It's it's PERMA, PERMA, but it's like a authentic happiness inventory. And we take it at the beginning of coaching. And then I have them take it at the end of coaching to see if their overall satisfaction with life has improved because of the changes in their habits and their behaviors over the last 3 months. And I had one client in particular who kind of laughed it off in the beginning and was like, this is silly. This is health coaching. Why am I taking a happiness quiz? And had dramatic results at the end and was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. It's not about the number. It is. It's about so many other indicators. If we could go back and you spoke into the peace with the body, the happy weight. Can you speak into how that opens up for people? I mean, do you do that through the coaching? Is there anything that you may guide them through? Or is it a byproduct of what, is increasing their awareness?
It's ultimately a byproduct. So my focus is just to shift them away from the numbers, to shift them away from calorie counts and the number on the scale and the number on their jeans or whatever numbers they're fixated on, because a lot of times it is a numbers game when you're trying to diet, when you're trying to change your body and lose weight, eat properly, whatever that looks like for you. And I want to shift them away from the numbers aspect of it and more into what do you feel about what you're doing? How does this make you feel? Do you feel like you're functioning at your best? Do you feel like you have energy to get home from work and still play with your kids or take your dog out? Whatever your day looks like, do you feel like you have the energy and the desire to show up wholeheartedly for it from start to finish? Or are you fizzling out because you've restricted food during the day and now there's no energy when you get home and now you're going to binge dinner because your body is screaming for food? So that's why I focus so heavily on the emotions and the mindset around it rather than the numbers. The happy weight isn't even something that we necessarily discuss until we're well into coaching, because then I can kind of say to them, this might be where your body is. I had one client who was super excited because he lost a couple of pounds, and I was like, okay, that's great, and that's not that it's not something to celebrate, but I want you to see all these other wins that you've had as well. I don't want you to think I've won this because I lost a few pounds. I want you to think I lost a few pounds and I've had all these other wins along the way that count just as much. And so another thing we talked about is he might just be at his happy weight. And that could just be where his body is meant to be. And it was something he had to a hurdle that he had to kind of mentally get over. But I think, by the time we had wrapped up coaching, it had kind of sunk in that I need to love this body as it is right now. And for everybody, this isn't just for, my clients, this is for everybody listening. If you don't love your body the way that it is right now, you're not going to love it any other way either. You need to be able to make peace with your body the way that it is, flaws and all. Whatever you hate about your body, you can kind of neutralize it, and we'll get into that in a little bit with the concept of body neutrality. But if you can't love it, neutralize it, because you've got to be able to accept the body that you're in before you can ever dream of loving your body, whatever it might look like.
I love everything you're introducing about loving your body. It's about happiness and fulfillment and not a number. I think of times, like, even if you eat, the feelings and the beating up afterwards, or what you do to yourself, no matter what, afterwards, is you're never feeling happy. You're never feeling okay. You're just beating yourself more. So you had feelings going into it. Now you have even more feelings afterwards. So now you have two sets. You have more sets but the idea of being happy and fulfilled, because that's really what it's about. Doesn't matter what way or where you're at. If you're happy and fulfilled, you're going to be happy and fulfilled. Hey.
And like Claudine said, the connection between fullness and actual satisfaction. I mean, you can eat grilled chicken and steamed broccoli and feel full, but are you satisfied? And maybe that day you are, but if you eat that every day for the rest of your life, because that's the diet that you're on, and there's no wiggle room to maybe have pasta or something different for lunch, are you really satisfied? And if you're not, then it's not sustainable.
Well, I wanted to say, you brought up neutrality, so I'm going to bring it up. So what, because I've never heard that being neutralizing. So if you could explain that.
Oh my goodness. Body neutrality is one of my favorite topics. So the way that I present it to people is, let's say you are out grocery shopping and you're surrounded by a ton of people everywhere. It's the day before Thanksgiving and everyone's getting their shopping done. I know that's gone, but next year. And you don't inherently hate or love any of those people. They're just other bodies. And maybe somebody reached a can that you couldn't get off of a shelf and you're like, oh, that was a nice person. But you're not thinking like, oh, that was a nice thin person, or that was a nice fat person. You're just thinking that was a nice person, period, end of story. And to be able to bring that concept back to yourself in your own body is a game changer. To be able to look at yourself in the mirror and not judge, and to just say, I have a body. I am not my body. So ultimately, this is meat suit, as I've heard it called, and I love that, so I latch onto it. But it's a meat suit, a flesh suit, whatever you want to call it, that we are inhabiting during our time on Earth. But we as spirits, we as people, we as souls are so much more than whatever this package is that we're in. And so body neutrality helps you get there by realizing that you are not your body. It's just a thing that carries you around the earth, and it's inconsequential, really, to being the person that you want to be. So if you can remove yourself from the judgment and just say, instead of saying, I have fat thighs, be like, I have thighs. And then eventually you might get to, I have strong thighs. And you might get to, my thighs let me walk around. And not everybody has that privilege. And then you start to think, I'm pretty damn grateful for my thighs. Because even though maybe they're bigger than I envisioned them to be in my perfect image of myself, look at all the things that they allow me to do. And there's people out there that either can't use their legs or don't have legs. And how dare you not be grateful for having them and for having useful legs? And so it kind of gets into a little bit of an ableism conversation that I'm not going to dive into, but just being able to appreciate yourself. Maybe you have a great sense of humor. Maybe you truly love your family and you put them above everything else, and that's really important to you. Those are all things that you can love about yourself that have nothing to do with your body. And if you want to start looking at the way you can love your body, or even just appreciate it, or stop hating it, however basic that needs to be for you right now, because it's a big leap from hating your body to loving your body. And I'll be perfectly honest, I love my body most of the time. There are days where I feel like I just accept my body, and that's okay because I'm human, and that's just part of our experience. There are days where I find I could find flaws and pick them apart if I really wanted to, but I don't really want to because I'm past that. I've gotten past the point of like wasting my time picking myself apart when I can spend my time doing so many more productive things in life than staring at myself in the mirror and being like, man, I hate my stomach, or man, I don't like my knees, or whatever it is. So just being able to remove judgment on yourself the same way that you don't immediately pass judgment on other people, and almost looking at yourself as like a stranger for a second and just, how would I judge that person in the mirror if that person wasn't me? Probably wouldn't care much.
Yeah, I'm sitting here and thinking of in my assessment, we have a very large body shame culture. And I say culture because yes, it's in our family within ourselves, but I think it's bigger. It's in our community and certainly our media, our social media, our society. In United States, I think there is differences in cultures and how they view body. So if you could apply that the shame, body shame with this neutrality, I don't know if you could speak into that a little, Amanda.
Absolutely. So the body shame almost goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it depends on how you were raised and what the ideal body looks like for you. So if you were raised to believe that your ideal body was thin or a particular weight or a particular shape, then there might be shame passed on other people for having bodies outside of that image. So if your parents, aunts and uncles, siblings, whatever, pass judgment on people who didn't look that particular way, then you might learn to also pass shame and judgment on them as well. And if you grow up and your body looks like those other people and not like the ideal image, well, what do you know? You're going to pass shame on yourself or pass judgment on yourself, and you're going to feel shame because you haven't achieved thinness. You haven't achieved that particular image that you were going for, when in reality, we have such little control over the actual size and shape of our bodies. It's wild how little control we actually have over it. So the shame is really just chasing a perfection that doesn't exist and feeling like you are being judgmental of somebody for existing outside of whatever perfect image you've created or that your family, your parents have created for you in your head. Once we realize that's not real and that there's no one perfect body, that every body is supposed to be different, think of how boring it would be if every single person looked exactly the same. And I know that's so cliche, but it's true. If every single person looked exactly like you, how would you pick somebody out of a crowd? Like, it would just get really old after a while. So instead of passing shame and judgment on people that don't look like you, I wish that we would all embrace everyone's differences.
Yeah, is there some tips you can share with our audience to do that? I'm hearing a few of them already, right? Like it's looking in the mirror and accepting it, and there's a very different conversation that you made some distinctions on, like right, like it's not fat thighs, I have thighs. I'm grateful for what my thighs can do. Yes, my thighs may be larger than I experience. But is there some things that you could share with our audience that they can utilize for themselves to help break them out of it? Because I do think, it's much stronger than just our family and what's internalized. Because, right, you think of our ads. Our ads are all about, if you're this, then you'll have that. Like you'll be the hot girl and you'll get the car and you get the guy. And our reality TV shows are based on that. So I'm just wondering if there's some other.
No, just before you get to that, out of our conversation, that is what is hitting me the strongest is like, oh my God, it's the ideas of who we're supposed to be body-wise and none of it's real. But we have created such a structure. I mean, it's like an embedded structure. It's almost mind-blowing when you just take it in and you're like, oh my God, all this has been built. It's such a hard core structure that this is how it has to be. Nobody stands a chance in it, really.
No, we're all designed to fail.
Because even people that are perfect, you hear how many people are perfect bodies, supposedly, or perfect beauty, and they have issues like there's no way to make it okay.
No, it's a setup. To me, the whole system is set up to, like, we all fail. And we all suffer in the failing, right? Like that's the insanity of this in some ways.
We're set up to fail, and we're told that if we fail, we're the worst and we have to suffer it and we have to be miserable and beat ourselves up, but we're set up to fail. So I think the best thing that we can do is just become aware of how strong of an influence diet culture has on our lives. And between the media, magazines, television, movies, social media, people showing just a highlight reel and everything being photoshopped and edited, which is absolutely insane. When you realize that most of what you're seeing is fake in any sort of photo, be it online, be it on a newspaper, on TV, most of what you're seeing is somehow altered. And if not a little bit altered, sometimes it's completely fake. It's a really wild concept to wrap your head around, because you want to believe what you're seeing, and you don't want to have to question everything and think, is that a lie? Is that a lie? Like, just go around doubting everything. But at the same time, you have to realize that, like you said, even those people who look like they are perfect, they have these perfect bodies and they're thin and they're gorgeous, and there's an opportunity cost behind that. Those people are probably miserable. So they're chasing that image of perfection, but they are working out hours and hours a day. They are told what they can eat, how much they can eat, when they can eat it. They have probably no social life, because that would involve eating something outside of your strict diet, or, just talking to somebody who actually might be happy, and then you realizing, I don't want to do this anymore. The other people, as far as like we were talking about, photoshopped and edited highlight reels on social media, people share what they want you to see. It's marketing, and it's not real life. So when you can kind of separate the real life from the perfection that they're trying to show you, and that diet culture is trying to shove down your throat, you just get more comfortable with like differences and variety in what you see. You get more comfortable with not seeing the same vision of beauty all the time, and you start to find beauty in different things. You start to find beauty in the people that don't look like you. You start to just become more aware of the diversity that is everywhere. And so one of the things that you can do that's super easy is just go through your social media and ask yourself if that particular person that you're following is really serving you. And are they representing you? Are they representing something that you want to be? Or are they just showing you the perfect moments that are fractions of their life, and you have no idea what the behind the scenes look like? So for me personally, I'm always very careful to show up authentically on social media. I don't do a highlight reel. I always make sure I've shown up on social media crying so many times, because I want to be real. I want people to know that this is who I am through and through, and I'm not going to show you just the good stuff. I'm going to show you everything. And I'm actually going to start in the new year doing some deeper dives into that, the good, the bad, and the ugly of living in diet culture and having an eating disorder. And got some really great stuff coming up on the horizon with that, to get into the stuff that no one else seems to want to share, but it's real. And I think once you become aware of the fact that what you're seeing it's a facade, you kind of start to not doubt everything, because that's not the game here. The mission isn't to start doubting everything around you, but it's just to become aware of what's real, what's fake, and what's just for entertainment purposes. It's like when I worked in a bank for a long time, and you get the money that comes in, and it's counterfeit money. It says like for entertainment, for movie use only. And I'm like, how did this get passed off in a store? Are you for real? Come on now. This doesn't even look real. But we buy it. We see stuff in movies and we buy it, because we're like, oh, I'm seeing it with my own two eyes. It must be real. You have no idea the hours of editing and CGI and whatever else went into that for you to be seeing it in that particular way.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Being our own question and observation, we're assigning, because we're assigning a value then, right? Like it's like handing over our power, as you said. Oh, that's it. That person is, the new standard, or however that looks like. So asking ourselves, is it serving us?
I'm sure we could talk for hours on this, but any final words of wisdom, anything you want to present or share with us for our audience before we finish up?
The one thing I always share is I want to tell whoever's listening that you are enough exactly as you are. And I think that that's something we don't hear enough in life, with constantly chasing certain weight or a certain body shape or a certain look, whatever it is. You are enough exactly as you are right now. And it's so worth it to celebrate the small wins, because you don't have to make these big changes. Like, a lot of my clients will come to me and they want to wake up tomorrow and be a brand new person. But if you don't appreciate who you are right now, and if you don't celebrate those tiny little wins along the way, those big wins are never going to show up for you. So even if it's just, I didn't hit snooze on my alarm today, celebrate that. Like, throw yourself a damn party, because that's a win. If you get into the spirit of celebrating those little things, then you're going to start finding bigger and bigger things to celebrate. And it's the same thing with gratitude. If you start finding gratitude for those tiny little things, like back to what I said earlier, dropping the glass of water. I'm grateful that I didn't drop a glass of water today. That sounds so silly, but you find other things, like my socks are clean and dry. I don't know. I have a bed to sleep in. Like, you find gratitude for all the tiny little things here and there in your life. And then eventually the things that you're grateful for just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think a lot of people don't realize that change is a snowball effect. And so if you don't start with that tiny little it could be a single snowflake, but if you don't start with that, you're never going to get that giant snowball rolling down the hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm big on a gratitude practice. And so I'm hearing you, there's two pieces here, right? The gratitude generates more to be an appreciation of it. I'm also hearing the celebration also generates, you said bigger wins, but I think it also has a chemical change for us when we can start to do the woohoo. And I really want to inspire you. This inspires me to ask our listeners to embody this conversation through that. So we're going to ask everybody who's listening to celebrate a win. Now, that you create the measuring stick. I mean, because that's what I hear this whole conversation is, like, we could either hand our power over and say they have the measuring stick or I have the measuring stick. So celebrate your wins. And if it is having clean socks on and no, falling glasses of water, or hey, I chose to, engage my body in a walk or my spirit in a prayer, or however that looks, let's embody that. And if they do, put that on your social media and tag us at the BTO podcast on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook to see what are we doing? How are we, celebrating who we are in each moment?
If we were even celebrating with gratitude the little moments, we wouldn't have time for anything else but gratitude. Like, that we're speaking, that we have a phone, that we can see each other. Like, there's so much to be.
There really is. And I think we get desensitized.
And that gets to be the new water that you're swimming in. Think about that. Then you get to just swim in gratitude all the time. And how much cooler is that than to be swimming in like judgment or shame or any of those icky things?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that. I one of the things that I often say to my clients is, like, have a celebration ritual. And again, not from a rigidity, right? Because often we don't even see our own things to celebrate. And so, friends and partners, I am often like, if I don't catch it, I invite you to remind me of what to celebrate. Because I may be like, oh yeah, I just did that. Today we had an interview with Amanda, right? That's a win for all three of us and for everyone else who gets to listen. And there is like a high five, whoop, whoop. But if I don't see that and I can't even register because I'm in my stuff, like someone else can do it for me. Be like, oh, Claude, great. Amanda, great. We get to have a team. We don't have to do this alone.
Stop brushing off all the great stuff that's happening in your life and just live in it.
Let's add that to the challenge or the invitation to our listeners is find a little celebration, but also remind somebody else of their even the littlest things at a celebration, like so that we make it a relational, that we don't always have to do it alone, so that we can share. I love that.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and I look forward to it. I know that you and I will be doing an Instagram live, and this is a near and dear topic.
Ooh, cool.
I'm a bit, I think for me, if I could just share, is one of the things that opened my eyes up. You mentioned it today, is right, accepting yourself where you are in your body. So being a woman of weight loss, I remember going to see my doctor, and he wasn't there, and there was a substitute doctor. And I had been losing weight, and he goes, well, what's your goal weight? And I said, oh, it's, 175 pounds. And he was like, And he wouldn't look at me. There was no eye contact. I'm like, what? Something wrong? And he's looking through my chart, and he's like, have you told your doctor about that? And I can't even remember the name of my doctor right now. So how funny is that? And I'm like, well, yeah, you have to fill it out in the paperwork, right? And he's like, you'll never be that way. I was devastated. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, to carry the 360 pounds for as long as you have, your body has magnificently changed its structure. My bones got thicker, right? I was a painter with my brother for 8 years. That's how I paid for college and grad school. He's like, to do what you've done with the weight, your body adapted, and that doesn't shrink. Just because you lost 160 pounds, the body didn't change your bone structure. He's like, you will never have that kind of body. And that was many years ago, but I have to tell you, like, I go back there every once in a while when I hear my judgment or like, oh, I want that. And it's like, oh, no, this is my body. This is my magnificent body. Like the one that carried me for 40 plus years up and down 30 foot, ladders and all the crazy stuff that I did. I'm grateful for what it did to hold me when I was at that kind of size. And, but no one really has that open conversation with you, right? Like, I thought I can fantasize and go, oh yeah, I'm going to I'm going to become a ballerina. Like, hell no, I'm never going to be a ballerina.
And God bless that doctor for having that conversation with you and having enough compassion and love for you to tell you that and not to let you just chase that particular number and try to morph your body into something that it doesn't want to be. So it hurt in the moment, but ultimately he did you a favor because now you realize that this is what my body is. So
exactly. And maybe, it changed
maybe
me.
175 doesn't look good on you. Maybe that's, maybe you would look unhealthy. I think you look great now. And I think that 25 pounds lighter, you probably wouldn't look healthy. So
I have no idea, but it changed my happy weight mindset. Like, it's no longer like, you're right. It's not that weight. It's like, okay, so I'm like Mark, I have a range and I know that range and I can feel when I'm pushing edge on one or pushing edge on other and be like, right, I'm not feeling it. Even if I lose too much, like, so there's a happy range, but I would agree with you. I think it is not a conversation that we have with ourselves, our colleagues, our friends. And I'm glad that you're having that conversation and allowing people the space. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to have it. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
It's been a pleasure.
It has been, Amanda. I wish you well. And thank you for being guest on our show today and having this conversation. It's so overdue in our society.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was so nice to meet you. And Claudine, always a pleasure.
Same here. So I want to thank everyone for listening to Breakthrough the Ordinary podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and our deep dive into, self-love and the wisdom to live an extraordinary life. If you'd like to support the podcast on social media, please follow us at the BTO Podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.